Hello, and welcome to Executive Mosaic's video interview series. I'm Summer Myatt, and here to speak with me today is John Zangardi, CEO of Redhorse Corporation. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Summer. I'm very glad to be here. Looking forward to our discussion today.
Awesome. So, John, you earned a PhD in philosophy at George Mason University. Can you talk about what sparked your interest in that subject?
Yeah, actually, the PhD was in economics and public policy. A PhD is a research degree as opposed to a DBA, which is more of a working degree. So the word philosophy refers to a category of brief, but it doesn't really refer to the specialization, which is economics and public policy. So I consider myself more of an economist than anything else. But in a general sense, what you get from a PhD, because it's really a research degree, is a tool set. And those tools become things that you can bring to bear in a lot of different problems. So I'll be honest with you, I really don't use anything I learned in economics today other than when I read the newspaper or think about making an investment decision. But what I learned in the PhD is that whatever I need to do to get things right, I can go out and figure it out. You know, for example, back when we did this back in the dark ages, we didn't have the tools that people have now. And as we were working an economics problem, we used the software package, engineers use to model circuits. And we co-opted it and made it useful for some work we were doing to do analysis of what we call the Cobb-Douglas function, which is an economic concept for measuring output. So the idea here is that you are taught to research what you need to do to develop a tool to solve a problem. So it's less about specifics. It's not a CPA where you're trained to be an accountant. It's more about the ability to figure things out.
And if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice before you started your career, what would that be?
Don't sweat things as much. Life works out, right? And you know that. I think one of the things that separates the wheat from the chaff is persistence. There's a lot of other factors like integrity, your ability to talk with people and communicate, but it's really persistence, really never giving up. And I didn't really understand that when I was younger, but I now understand it when I'm older, that sense of stick-to-itness really makes a big difference.
And you've been with Redhorse now for 2 years. You were recently elevated from president in December. What changes have you seen or enacted during your time at Redhorse thus far, and what do you see in the horizon under your leadership?
So we closed on an investment from Blue Delta Capital on December 31st. So we are, give or take it about, almost 5 months into it right now. And first off, the first big change is we now have a great partner in Blue Delta Capital. They're there for us, they help us, and they're going to be a key ingredient to our focus on growth. Along those lines, you really want to establish a team around you that has been where you want to go. Where we want to go is to grow and become a much bigger brand within the market space that we operate in, which is environment and energy, national security, IC, the data analytics piece. So I established a board, or helped establish a board around some key folks who have been to where we want to go and have the experience that's necessary to help us put in place the right ingredients. In fact, we just recently hired, or I should say brought on, our 5th and final board member. The gentleman is well respected in the industry, grew a company from almost nothing to nearly $1 billion. So he's been there where we want to go. But we're also establishing a leadership team. I brought on a COO back in late January, early February, Nancy St. Louis. And as we walk further down the road into the summertime, we'll be bringing on a Chief Growth Officer and Chief Delivery Officer to help us focus more on execution. And I say the third element after establishing the board and bringing on new leadership is to begin to change the culture. So it doesn't mean that the culture is bad here or anything like that, but it's more about our focus. And our focus has always been on small, right? We want to be large. We want to be in the full and open space. And that requires people to start thinking differently. And kind of what I mean here is people create sort of a path dependency. We're just used to looking at things from a small perspective, therefore we must think small. No, we got to think big. We could go after bigger things. We just have to pull it together and row in the right direction. So I think those are really the big things we've done so far. What do I see on the horizon? I'd like to see us expand ourselves more in the analytics space. We have done some interesting work there, and we want to continue doing work with organizations like the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, or with the Navy, or with the Air Force. We want to build some good partnerships with companies that are working in that space. We also want to develop solutions in artificial intelligence for microgrids. So really cool stuff there that I think is firmly in that energy and environment wedge, and it really aligns well with the Biden administration emphasis on energy.
And speaking of artificial intelligence, AI is rapidly growing across the federal landscape. More and more organizations are using it to process their massive amounts of data. In your work with the Joint AI Center, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities you've seen surrounding AI?
Yeah, so let's start with opportunities, because let's start with the positives first. I really think that artificial intelligence and machine learning and even robotic process automation offer are insights or knowledge mining that is so useful to assist decision makers with making a decision or improving things. So let's just take a couple examples. I had just recently talked about artificial intelligence microgrids. So that's about the effective, efficient use of energy. Artificial intelligence can help you determine the best sources to make things just more efficient, which leads to hopefully more reliable delivery of energy at a lower cost. But if you look at it from a warfighter perspective, the Joint All-Domain Command and Control effort, I think machine learning and artificial intelligence is absolutely critical to how that will be enabled in the future. But even more on a more practical level, looking at predictive maintenance. You know, I flew planes, and if you can use artificial intelligence to help you determine when to conduct maintenance on an aircraft before the aircraft breaks, that's key to ensuring that the full mission capability rates of aircraft that support our national security are available when you need it. So from an opportunity perspective, this is really ripe for things. But let me give you one more practical example from when I was a CIO at DHS. Something like natural language processing can be used in the FOIA process. There's always complaints out there about, wow, geez, I put a request in for FOIA and it's taking too long. Well, for folks that never dealt with a FOIA request, I'd like all the emails from a certain person for these period of time. Well, think of all the emails you get where people hit reply all and you get them. Every one of them goes into a stack. Going through that stack of emails to ferret out what exactly was asked for in the FOIA request could be accelerated with the application of natural language processing. That's just one example where we could take care of the customers better, right? Quicker resolution to inquiries from the taxpayer, I think, is absolutely an important aspect that can't be denied. But let's talk about challenges. You know, I mentioned earlier that I was an economist, and anytime a new technology comes around, people believe that it's going to take away jobs. And there will be changes in how people are unemployed. But what we've seen, if you look back over history, whenever new technologies came into place, other jobs were created, right? I mean, if it were true that new technology does away with jobs, well, with all the technology we've introduced since the Industrial Revolution, maybe you and I should be doing nothing right now. Not true. But I think the real challenges are to ensure that as we move forward with artificial intelligence and machine learning, that we think about unintended bias in the algorithms that are being put together. Some people refer to that as ethical AI. I think that is very important for us to be concerned about. We have to be concerned about data privacy and the security of that data. And we have to be also concerned that when we go back and look at solving a particular problem, that there is sufficient data for us to begin to solve that problem. So I think the challenges fall into the trust category, the security of the data, category and the scarcity of the data category.
And John, I know during your time at DHS as CIO, you also implemented a multi-cloud strategy. Since your time there, what changes have you seen in the cloud, and what do you envision for the future as more organizations migrate?
It's really an interesting thought that, I've been around long enough to have seen a lot of things happen. And, not all of them are new. I mean, if I go back to college when I was learning Fortran a long time ago, probably most people don't know what Fortran is. We had little key cards and we shared a computer at the university, right? And waited for the printouts. Well, that's kind of what cloud is today. It's about a shared resource in its simplest terms. But the question is, like, where is it going for the future? And I really think that the future is a little different as you go forward, but it builds upon what we're doing right now and in the past. So let me walk through a couple thoughts. First, data is the lifeblood of a business, of the military, of the intelligence community, of the federal government. It's literally the lifeblood. Some people have referred to it as oil, how oil is so important for fueling our economy or energy. I think it's going to become more ubiquitous, the need for it, and that will drive security. So that's the first change. I think that really has to happen. And I know the major cloud providing companies are very focused on security, and I was too as a CIO. And it's a complicated problem. But I think the trends are going to start pushing to something along the lines of distributed computing, or some people refer to it as edge computing. Bandwidth, latency become issues. And let me focus in on a really good example. Back when we were looking at data center consolidation when I was in the Navy, there were a lot of data centers. And as we went through them, we realized, well, the consolidation problem isn't as easy as you think. For instance, aircraft trainers need to be close to the data center that powers them because of latency. You would not want to have a pilot in a simulator or a trainer putting in a correction into the stick or the yoke or the rudders and have to wait 3 or 4 or 5 seconds for a response from it. So that latency piece there is very important. But you can also look at it from a manufacturing point of view. So, major silicon chip producers would really like to have, for the manufacturing process, the data center very close to the production process for similar reasons. So I think the future also includes a need for increased storage because there's an increased dependency upon data centers. I drive down Route 28 routinely, and it seems to me the data centers just spring up like weeds. I don't think that trend's going to end in the future. I think a third trend that we should look for is greater specialization in data centers. You might see data centers specializing along industry lines based upon regulation or need for analytics. Just think about the efforts around the intelligence community's cloud. I would say that is a very specialized cloud because of the security requirements. We could also see specialization along regional areas for a lot of different purposes because maybe one region of the world needs this kind of data more than that kind of data, and that's what you put there. I also think IoT is going to drive some changes in how the cloud is operated in the future. So in my mind, I think the big trends are the need for more security. Distributed computing is a part of our future. Increased storage is coming. There's going to be greater specialization, and IoT are the big trends in the future as we look at cloud.
John, I want to talk about cybersecurity. Back in November, you wrote, "Hackers are increasingly sophisticated. The attack rate is not going down, and attack vectors are constantly changing. Any weakness can be exploited." Now, 2 years after the SolarWinds attack, where do we stand in cybersecurity? Where are the remaining gaps, and what have we accomplished thus far?
Didn't Richard Nixon say, "Trust but verify"? So I think cybersecurity is always a case of trust but verify. And I think that what we're seeing right now in Eastern Europe is an indicator that we need to, as CISA would say, shields up. I think organizations in general have to be more wary of hackers. I am seeing personally not even at work, more sophisticated phishing attempts. In fact, yesterday my wife received a phishing attempt saying that we bought a bidet and they're shipping it to us. And it was clear that it was all wrong, and they wanted us to call them and give us our credit card number. Clearly for me, it was a phishing attempt, but they are becoming more sophisticated, and I think that's a problem. But let's get to the core of that article. People always say diversity is a strength, and I agree with that. But I think it's important to apply it to security. And if you establish, if you will, a mono software approach to how you secure your enterprise, you are very dependent upon that one particular tool or vendor. And if that vendor or tool is breached, how do you restore your operating capability? And that comes down to a couple pieces. Reputational, how people view it. And if your PII or your private data is exposed, that could create a lot of legal liability for a company. It's not the right practice for people's data to be exposed, and when it is exposed, it causes a problem for that particular person to deal with, maybe changing credit cards, maybe changing bank account numbers. So the implications are big on why you should not put all your eggs in one basket. But the problem I think out there that we have to face as we're going forward is the language of cybersecurity. From the plethora of products out there, it's very hard to make a choice. The technical aspects of it are very deep and could be confusing to many leaders. And I think that the language of cybersecurity explanations has to be converted into a language that leadership understands. And I think that's particularly important at the board level and at the C level, that when a CISO or a CIO explains something to leadership or the board, it's done in a way that talks about it in first English, a common language, talks about it in terms of mission, but talks about it into things like probability of occurrence and then the impact of that occurrence. And the way I approached it when I was in DHS is I might say that, hey, the risk here is moderate. We've taken steps to mitigate it by doing this. But if indeed there's an incursion here, it means that, well, there may be some long lines at the airport to go through customs that may make the media. So being able to explain that risk of that starts putting it into perspective. I was talking to a CFO on a board that I am on, and she's also a board member. And her question was, well, how do I know that what I'm spending on cybersecurity is the right number? And I said, that's a really difficult decision. And I think that this conversation we're talking about here, where you explain it in English and talk about the probability of occurrence and the impact of it, is really key. So risk is the metric.
There's been an increasing focus on software modernization within the government. Can you expand a little bit on the role of software in cybersecurity?
Sure. If you've read the recent Biden administration executive orders, they're putting a focus on cybersecurity, of which software supply chain is a piece of it. I believe that it's all important. The software bill of materials, where you have a sense of the code that's being put into it, where it came from, that you can document its history, that you understand the history of its security, is really important to put together. So that software bill of materials, or SBOM as it's known, can help you avoid vulnerabilities. NIST is putting out guidelines. Recently, we saw the Secure Software Development Framework, and I think that's an important thing for all organizations to read, to begin internalizing that and understanding where NIST is taking this. I think it's critically important. But I will say also on those lines, it's always important that proper cyber hygiene, multi-factor authentication, and those basics are still done. But when you talk about the actual development of software, we understand that it can be from commercial sources, it can be from open sources, it can be made somewhere else. Understanding where it came from and being able to attest to where it came from and how secure it is, I think, is a key piece. DevSecOps plays an increasingly important role in life here. we have to build in security from the start. And they used to say when I was in the Navy, you want to bake in your security up front, right? It's too late once you bake the muffin to add some extra sugar.
Well, John, thank you so much for speaking with me today and for all the work you do at Redhorse.
Thank you, Summer. I appreciated the time talking with you. Have a great day.